Hey, everybody. Welcome back for yet another episode of the So Does It Matter, a weekly one-on-one podcast where we try to talk to somebody who at least I think is important in California politics and what's going on in California politics. And it's an absolute treat and a pleasure today to talk to somebody who has been a personal friend for decades, is a great guy, and has played an integral role in California politics, which we'll be talking about in a minute. Our guest is Joel Pollak, who has been named the new opinion page editor of the very new California Post, which is coming out. So before we get, well, you could say hi, Joel.
Hello.
We're going to get to Joel in just a second. Before we do that, I just wanted to ask all of you to do a few things to help us out so that more people see this great interview and things like it. If you're watching on Substack, if you would restack this, ideally with a note, something that says, John is amazing and Joel is too, right at the bottom. And then if you would like it, if you're watching it on YouTube, subscribe and like it. Anything you do to share this just helps us to spread the message. That having been said, obviously I'm wearing this outfit today because there was a big event at Dodger Stadium celebrating the second time repeat World Series champion Dodgers. So very excited about that. As a matter of fact, I was thinking happy thoughts for our Joel's and my friend, heavenly thoughts for our friend Andrew Breitbart, who is a diehard Dodgers fan and would have been at the World Series with me. I guarantee you. He might have even dragged me to Baltimore. Actually, I think he would have. But the way that we do this, Joel may know this if he's watched this before, is I went over to ChatGPT and I said, I do a conservative podcast and my guest is Joel Pollak. Give me an introduction. And I looked at it long enough. You're going to be impressed, Joel, because it already knows about your new job. You ready? Here's what it said. It says, today's guest is Joel Pollak, newly named opinion page editor of the soon-to-launch California Post. He's a seasoned journalist, attorney, and author, best known for his years as senior editor-at-large at Breitbart News, those years that ended like yesterday, where he became one of the most recognizable conservative voices in national media. Born in South Africa and raised in Chicago, Joel graduated magna cum laude from Harvard, earned a law degree from Harvard, and even ran for Congress in Illinois in 2010. Now he's bringing that sharp legal mind and fearless editorial voice to California's media scene, and we'll talk to him about what that means for journalism, politics, and the fight over ideas in this state. I'm telling you, the internet remains undefeated. That's pretty good.
It just shows you can't trust AI for anything. I mean, it's all lies. It's all lies. No, it's very nice that ChatGPT seems to have a pro-me bias. That's very sweet.
Well,
But yes,
what I have actually figured out is it knows who I am because I'm asking it questions all the time. So I'm sure that if someone else get on here, it would say right-wing crazy lunatic person Joel Pollak, who is a tool for Donald Trump, is now on a podcast on your show. So Joel, thank you very much for joining us. And I thought as a first topic, we might actually talk about, before we talk about your new gig with the California Post, which is amazing, and I can't wait to talk about it. Why don't you talk to our watchers and readers about your path and how you got to where you are right now, sitting in this new office, which is
well, yes, the office behind me is the office of the California Post here in Los Angeles, California, and it's being put together as we speak. It's the partially constructed but fully operational California Post here, and we're building it out. You can probably hear some construction noise in the background, and my colleagues are sitting over to my right and my left, probably getting annoyed by my loud conversation because we don't have anything set up yet, but it is happening very rapidly for this type of thing. We're going to have a studio. We're going to do everything as well as it can possibly be done because the people who launched the California Post are very serious about creating an alternative voice within California. And actually, it's not even an alternative voice. It's the only voice, aside from a few policy blogs and other highly specialized publications. It's really the only news
right
voice
here.
that's going to cover, aside from Mr. Fleischman and Cal Matters and a few other great resources, it's going to be a mirror for the state as a whole. We have local media markets, some small, some very large, but we don't really have a statewide voice. And so the California Post is going to be that. So you said yesterday that I was Breitbart's senior editor at large. Yes, literally yesterday, I was Breitbart's senior editor at large. And the night before that, I was with Larry Solov, our CEO, who you know very well and who is Andrew Breitbart's best friend. And we were watching the LA Dodgers win the World Series, along with Alex Marlowe, the editor-in-chief, in Las Vegas, where we were covering the Republican Jewish Coalition Conference. That was my last event for Breitbart, and it was 15 years of adventure and an incredible experience. First, to work alongside Andrew Breitbart when I did, then the incredibly difficult weeks and months after he passed away of putting the new website together, keeping the staff morale where we did, high and motivated, and convincing the rest of the conservative world and then the rest of the news world that we were here to stay. And Breitbart really did incredibly well. It's under incredibly capable leadership in the very talented hands of Alex Marlowe and Larry and the whole team. And yeah, I was one of the OGs, as Larry used to say, one of the first employees. So leaving was certainly bittersweet. I really loved working there every day, right until the last minute. I loved everything I did there. But what really changed my focus was the Palisades fire. And I had lived in the Pacific Palisades for 6 years when the fire took place. And my house survived, but my neighborhood was completely destroyed. And we were displaced for months and months. We are still technically displaced and living in alternative accommodations, although we are not in Los Angeles at the moment because my wife, in all of this turmoil, was offered a job in a senior economic post in the Trump administration. So I said to her, take it. We don't know where this adventure is going. So we relocated to Washington, D.C. Actually, she moved there at the beginning of the year. I stayed in L.A. with our kids to finish the school year, to finish rock and roll, band concerts, and baseball seasons, Little League. In fact, we're not too far away from where the Palisades Little League relocated so that the kids could still play somewhere into another field in West LA. And the Palisades fire was a failure on so many levels. Of course, it was a natural disaster. Of course, the high winds are what spread the fire fundamentally. But there was no reason the fire should have been as bad as it was. There are no explanations really for why it was allowed to kindle in the first place. We now know that an arsonist set the New Year's Day fire that many of us sensed in the neighborhood. I came outside my house on January 1st and I smelled that New Year's Day fire. Firefighters
That's
knocked it
creepy.
down and we were told that it had been put out, but it was still smoldering in the roots of the plants there. And then in the high winds of January 7th, with Mayor Karen Bass out of town and Governor Gavin Newsom not having deployed any firefighting resources to the area, the closest deployed firefighters were in Santa Clarita, probably about 90 minutes away by car, and the fire reignited in those high winds. Now, we prepared for the high winds. I took down my son's baseball pitching net because it blows over in high winds. I took down our American flag on the flagpole because we had one flagpole actually snap in high winds. We are used to high winds in our part of LA because Pacific Palisades is on a hillside overlooking the ocean, and it's spectacularly beautiful, but we do get those Santa Ana winds coming down the canyons from the high ground from the San Fernando Valley, and we're used to it. Usually about 30 or 40 mile per hour winds, often at night. This was different. It was in the daytime. It was augmented by a very strong jet stream, so we knew it was going to be worse than usual. We had been warned in advance. So I prepared, but the mayor was not prepared. The governor was not prepared. The reservoir was empty. The firefighters weren't there. The police were guarding President Biden, who was in town. He was supposed to make a family visit, and then he was going to go to Coachella, I think. I can't even remember why now. But the police were deployed to protect him, not to protect us. And the insurance companies had been dropping people from their home insurance for the previous several months. In fact, my neighbor across the road from me, his insurance company informed him that they would be dropping his coverage, and the effective date of termination was something like 2 or 3 days after the fire. So he
Huh.
barely made it in there. But it just shows you the kind of setup that we had there. And I spoke to Trey Robinson, who's one of the lawyers representing many of the litigants suing various government entities over their mismanagement and negligence. And he told me that in more than a decade of working these legal cases involving fires and natural disasters, he had never seen a cascade of government failures as profound as the one in Pacific Palisades and the Palisades fire. You know, you look over at the Eaton fire in Altadena and Pasadena, equally devastating, in some ways more devastating. There was a cause there. There was a spark in the power lines, and there you have SoCal Edison making offers to people, and there's a lawsuit that identified a specific industrial cause, and there were other problems as well. There was a lack of firefighting resources. The LA County warning system didn't work, so they had some similar problems.
An
But the
empty
Palisades fire
reservoir.
really, what's that?
An empty reservoir sitting at the top of the mountain there.
That's in Palisades. We had a 117 million gallon reservoir that was empty, and it was empty to comply with a federal regulation about a crack in the cover. But the firefighters, even had they been deployed, wouldn't have had enough water. They ran out of water. Many people in my neighborhood, which burned on the second day of the fire, believe that it could have been saved had there been water in the hydrants. So I've been upset about this, as you might imagine, even though my home survived. It was a profoundly tragic event, and I talk about it all the time. In fact, I'm sure friends and relatives and even complete strangers on various modes of public transportation are tired of me talking about the fire. In fact, I'm only being half facetious because I was on a Southwest flight recently, and there was a married couple I was sitting next to, and somehow we got onto the topic of where are you from? Oh, where are you from? And I ended up talking about the fire. I mean, everybody
That's
I
all right.
met,
Well,
over the last 9 or 10
watch me
months,
do
that's all I
this.
talk about.
Give me a wrap up on the fire because I want to talk about the California Post.
Right, right. So the wrap up is too long, didn't read. The wrap up is that I'm highly motivated to do what the California Post is going to do, which is to hold up a mirror to the powers that be in the state and to demand accountability. And it's not a Republican thing or a Democratic thing. Obviously, the Post family of newspapers is right of center, but everybody, Democrat and Republican, believes that we deserve better. And that's going to be my mission at the California Post.
So, Joel, what is the timeline? When is the, obviously timing can change, but as of now, when is it anticipated that the people watching this podcast will be able to go to the California Post website and it's supposed to be active and live and ready to go?
It'll be in the new year. So we're going to do some publications, some dry runs for the next few weeks as we build out our staff, as we build out our offices, and we'll be launching early next year.
All right, so probably January sometime, you think? Maybe?
Sometime like that, yeah.
Yeah, that'll be duly noted as the editorial page editor. The exact launch date is above your pay grade, but you'll be ready as you get it together. So this is my opportunity to quickly say how excited that I am for the arrival of the California Post. I've written about it before when the first news just came out, because like you said, Joel, there's a bit of a news desert for non-left leaning biased news coverage in California. Katie Grimes in the California Globe does capital coverage kind of up in Sacramento. And obviously there's people that do what I do. I don't think anybody does it quite the way I do, but the reinforcements are welcome. And for all of you watching this who obviously are, if not fans of mine, then you're grossly fascinated in what I do. Joel Pollak there couldn't be a better pick to head up the opinion page of the California Post than Joel. He has a combination of philosophical grounding, smartness, and tenacity that kind of all rolls together. And then the piece that kind of crowns it all. I'm saying all these nice things about you so that you can show Julie and she can say, oh, John does have nice things to say. John's got the heart that goes with all of this. And John, let's try again. Joel has the heart. I have a heart too, but Joel's got the heart it brings it all together. And so I'm really, really excited for what this is going to be. And so if you had to kind of maybe give the elevator pitch for if you go on to the California Post on any given day and you go to I guess you're the editorial page editor, you go to the editorial page, what's that experience going to be like for somebody? What are they going to find there?
Well, we'll have an editorial perspective on the state government, but also local government and cultural issues in California, environmental issues. We're a unique state in that environmental issues are a concern for everybody. I'm not just talking about climate change and that sort of thing, but water and fire and forestry and fishery maintenance and
Reservoirs.
all of the things. Reservoirs is yeah. I mean, I have a real interest in those issues. I got a grant in 2018 to write about water in California. I have an environmental science background, perhaps not too common for a conservative writer, but I have a strong interest in the environment. I happen to have a different view than many of my left-wing environmental friends, but these are issues that affect everybody.
We all want to conserve these precious resources and use them for the betterment of mankind, but also for our future generations.
There's an interesting overlap now between left and right on the issue of forestry management. There is actually a bipartisan push in Congress right now to clear brush on federally owned forest land in California, federally owned wildlands and other lands in California, so that we don't have this massive reservoir of fuel to burn when a wildfire happens. And it's not always an arsonist that starts it, as it was in Pacific Palisades. And sometimes it's just a flat tire that blows out and a rim hits the asphalt and a spark flies into the brush. And then you've got a massive fire. That happened a few years ago in Northern California. So we have to tackle these issues. And I think they're fascinating issues, absolutely fascinating. it's not all just politics and identity politics. And yes, we know all the hot button issues. I mean, I've written about them on the few occasions I've been able to ask Gavin Newsom questions because he likes to avoid questions. I've asked him about his position on the transgender issue, where I think he understands he went too far. You saw him pull back in that podcast interview, now infamous podcast interview with the late
Hard to
Charlie
tell
Kirk,
what
who
his
was a friend of mine.
positions are. It depends who he's talking to, actually.
It depends who he's talking to, right? But he has focused on some of those issues, but the other issues are much more important. I mean, we have so much to talk about in California, and there are publications that do a great job, but we really need, at this point, especially with the state suffering so much from so many different problems, there's no excuse for the fourth largest economy in the world to have the highest poverty rate in the United States, to have the highest unemployment rate in the United States, to have the highest number of homeless people, to have crumbling infrastructure, to be running out of water, to be dealing with wildfires every year. That's not climate change. That's mismanagement. And there's never any accountability. I was explaining to some of my colleagues some of the unique features of California political life, such as, for example, the behested funds, these funds that politicians can ask people to donate to. In most other states, that would be called bribery. If you're asking me for money, even if I put it in a separate account and half my family is on the payroll or
Now you
whatever.
just report it. It's okay if you put it in an obscure report that nobody sees. I think, by the way, the most extreme and egregious example would be the fact that the First Lady, Governor Newsom's wife, works for a
First partner.
partner. The first partner works for a nonprofit that has been the recipient of behested payments requested by the state government. So, it's pretty bad here. So
So they get away with it, and they get away with it because in California, we are hyper focused on local news for understandable reasons. That's the level on which many of us interact with our surroundings on an everyday basis. But above that, there's no state level understanding. Even though people are proud to be from California, people have an idea of what the California dream looks like. They have a sense of the California flag and the ocean and the mountains. People have an identity, a very strong California identity, but there isn't a news media ecosystem that reflects that. And so Gavin Newsom, when he runs a campaign to redistrict the entire state and to disenfranchise hundreds of thousands of voters, if not millions, he talks about national politics. He's not talking about what this would do for California, what it's going to cost California, what it's going to do to California voters. He says this is all about Donald Trump and opposing Donald Trump. And Democratic Party voters in California fall in line because he succeeds in nationalizing state issues. The only reason he can do that is there isn't that intermediary level at
there's
the scale it needs to be to reflect to the state what is actually going on.
It's an interesting transition because I know we're going to talk a little bit about Prop 50, but when you talk about the behested payments, the other side of it is, and I've written about this pretty extensively, is that tens of millions of dollars of the $140 million plus that Gavin Newsom has raised for the Yes on 50 campaign has come from entities that do business with the state of California. Big checks from the public employee unions, from the trade unions, and even businesses. My favorite example is Netflix founder Reed Hastings. This year alone, Netflix has gotten like almost $40 million in tax credits from the state of California.
Right.
And then Reed Hastings turns around and writes a seven-figure check to support the campaign. Hastings is the largest single stockholder in Netflix. And so actually, I would commend to everyone's reading. It'll be in the show notes below. I love saying that. It'll be in the show notes below. But Joel's very first piece that he's written, it's not technically for the California Post yet because that doesn't exist yet. It's in works. So it's over on the New York Post site. But he's identified as the opinion page editor for our California Post, is on Prop 50. What's that article about, Joel?
Well, it's about how Gavin Newsom is wasting $250 million on this gerrymandering exercise when there are such intense and urgent needs across the state. And I think about my neighbors in Pacific Palisades who are struggling to find the funds to rebuild their homes. Most people, if they had insurance, were underinsured, and that's not through negligence. It's simply because they were either dropped by their private carrier and then forced onto the California Fair Plan, or because the cost of construction is simply so high that it's not enough to have even good insurance on paper because you're not going to be able to rebuild what you had before unless you have some help. There has been some help. I would say that the federal government has done generally a very good job of helping with the Small Business Administration, the Army Corps of Engineers. There has been great help from the
Isn't it amazing? theoretically the entity which is the furthest from you is doing the more help, while the dysfunctional state government and even maybe more dysfunctional city government
Right.
are falling way behind.
Yeah. So it's absurd to be spending that amount of money. And you mentioned the private funding coming in. So you add up the public funding and the private funding for the special election, and it's around about $500 million is going to be spent. That's $500 million that would rebuild Pacific Palisades to a significant extent. But they're not interested in rebuilding this town. They're interested in reshuffling the political deck. And we were talking here in the newsroom earlier about what would the headline be if and when Proposition 50 passes. And my suggestion was, we saved democracy by cutting the opposition in half. That's how Newsom is selling it. This is defending democracy. It's a really odd way to defend democracy, by taking the people's money that the state doesn't have, because the state's been running deficits for a couple of years, and using it to eliminate the ability of the political opposition to compete. That's not democracy. If you had a government that really represented the interests of those who live here and vote here, then it would place basic security and survival ahead of politics. But we've got it completely reversed.
All backwards. So we're going to move on. I have a little lightning round stuff that I do with you, Joel. I'm sure you're
All
going
right.
to enjoy it and look forward to it. But before I do that, I just wanted to tell our readers, I mean, this is going to be really, really great for California, the arrival of the California Post. I was already excited about it just because we've had this media desert, but I don't want to make it feel like Joel's paying me under the table here, but there couldn't be a better person to be in the role that they brought Joel in. It gives me a great deal of excitement and confidence about the strong voice of the California Post. So, Joel, congratulations
Thanks,
uh,
John. Very
on
sweet.
coming on board. And there's no pressure; everyone's going to be watching you, but you will have a strong ally here. And so, does it matter? Everybody here is going to be, I'm sure, going to the California Post every day. And so, on this lightning round, here we go. Joel, and these are supposed to be short answer. I tell this to you because you're an attorney and you wanted to be a member of Congress. So answers can get long. So short answer, what was the last book you read?
I'm in the process of reading a book about the deep state in Israel, written by an Israeli expert. Actually, I just took it out of my bag, so I don't have it here. I'd show it to you.
Do
But
you know the name of your
tries to
book?
answer I think it's called The Israeli Deep State. It
Okay.
tries to answer the question of, how did October 7th happen when Israel has such a powerful military and such a strong intelligence service? And basically, what this author says is that there's bureaucratic inertia where the civil servants essentially operate as a law unto themselves, and they hide information from political decision makers because they believe they're the ones who really run the country, and the elected representatives don't really count. It's a
All right.
familiar
I'm
situation
gonna catch
in
you in
many ways,
between
but
reading.
it's fascinating.
All right. What's the last movie you watched?
The last movie I watched was a Muppet movie from 1980s called The Dark Crystal. And I saw it when I was about 6 or 7, and it was playing in
I
a
remember.
50th anniversary version.
Let's see if I could do this. Gelfling. Isn't that the one that
Yeah, something like that. And I took
Pixies?
my 4-year-old. It scared me. I mean, I had nightmares about that movie for a long time, but
All
my 4-year-old loved it. I took her to see it in the theater.
right. So being a good dad, movie for kids, but also movie for adults. Your favorite American president of all time, besides the one that hired Julia?
James Madison.
And a quick
James
why?
Madison. He sat in his home office and basically came up with the idea of the separation of powers and the structure of our Constitution. He wrote the Virginia proposal, which later became the Constitution. I love that idea because I'm a writer. I love the idea of somebody sitting in a room and reading for long enough and writing for long enough and coming up with something brilliant that actually works in the real world.
He stood the test of time. Okay. Your least favorite president of all time in the history of the Republic?
Well, everyone says something like James Buchanan, and you
We've
can't really
gotten
blame them
James
for that.
Buchanan.
What's that?
We have gotten a James Buchanan. Is that
Yeah.
your choice?
Well, I hold a particular grudge against Millard Fillmore. No, I'm kidding. I don't care that much about Millard Fillmore. I'd say that in my lifetime, Obama has been the worst, and I say that not because of a strong partisan allegiance to one side, which I do have, but I think he introduced an era of division and norm breaking when it could very well have been the opposite. He came to prominence as a national figure by calling on us to transcend political boundaries. But when he governed from the hard far left. And you have seen the repercussions of that and the echoes of that ever since.
All right. Favorite world leader, again, besides the one that's hired Julia?
Well, the easy answer is Benjamin Netanyahu, who is an incredible statesman. And I've been critical of some of policies that he's introduced domestically, foreign, and so forth. But I actually had an opportunity recently to interview him, and he just is a statesman, possibly one of the most important of the last 100 years. So he would be a favorite. And then if I have to look further than that, because maybe that's an easy, okay, that's good enough. Okay. I mean, that's the predictable one with me because I do write a lot about Israel.
Well, that's okay. Well, look, it's two Jews on a podcast. We can talk about Israel. Well, all right. Least favorite world leader. And there's some real strong competition here.
Least favorite world leader. Well, I think Emmanuel Macron is my least favorite world leader because he is weak and he personifies weakness. However, he has held on to power inexplicably, even as the government of France continues to collapse. So yeah, I think Emmanuel Macron, even though for some reason every administration, Democrat and Republican, likes throwing state dinners for the French president. I don't know why. Maybe it's our American history, our love for the French and their assistance in the American Revolution. I have no idea. Maybe we see France as the epitome of Europe, and we have this romantic notion.
Maybe it's an excuse to serve French wine in the
Yeah,
White.
yeah, exactly.
All right. So this is where we ask. This is a tougher one because I'm throwing it at you. But do you have somebody that you look to who you see as an up and coming leader in? We normally ask California politics, but you've been away in D.C. for a little bit. Someone that you think of that, like, let's keep an eye on this person.
Well, I'll give you one California and one DC. How about that? So in California, I think you have a couple of leaders who have really stepped up since the fire. Tracy Park, who's the city council member for District 11 in Los Angeles, has really worked hard and has done a great job representing the interests of her constituents. And you don't have to agree with her on every policy just to see how hard she's working. And my old friend Ben Allen, who's termed out as a state senator, who's now running for insurance commissioner, he and I actually went to college together. And you'll appreciate this, John. When I was at Breitbart and we launched Breitbart California, which was a separate California page for a few years, he came to the launch that we. Yes, he came to the launch party in Sacramento. He was the only Democrat who came, but he came because it was in his district.
I remember.
And he's very fair-minded and gets things done. And I think he's someone to watch because he really has the credentials to be a statewide leader and even a leader on a national level. That's California. Do you want me to add in a national leader?
Running short.
There we go. Okay.
So right. If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing in California policy to make the state a better place, what would that one thing be?
That is a fantastic question. I would put in greater financial oversight. And that's the point I made to the president when he visited Pacific Palisades, and to Senator Rick Scott, who's coming to Pacific Palisades in mid-November to do a Senate hearing on site. I said, you need to appoint someone who will watch the money because we don't have any real oversight over how money is spent in California. It exists in little places here and there, but there's no authority that really keeps people honest in California.
With that, Joel, with the final statement of the lack of any oversight of what's going on with a single party authoritarian leadership in Sacramento, I want to thank you so much for hopping on this podcast with us. This is being recorded on Monday, which is actually Joel's first day on the job at the California Post. So I like your sense of priorities, taking care of me and this Substack. And so we'll publish this tomorrow, which is actually a good time to publish it. There's a little bit of a lull because the day after tomorrow, it's all going to be election coverage from the results from all around the country. But I just wanted to thank you very much for your friendship over the years and tell you how we are and also how excited we are for Julia and what she's doing back in the Trump administration. We think it's great. So thank you very much.
Thanks, John.